Mommy, my 6-year-old daughter runs into the study, loudly pulling me out of my work. What is it, Abby? My tooth finally fell out. She holds her hand up and shows me. I smile, feeling guilty for putting my work above her. Baby, that's so exciting. Your first tooth. Uh-huh. She tilts her head back and opens her mouth wide, proudly displaying the new gap in her top row of chompers. You're getting so big, honey. Yup, and I get to give it to the tooth fairy tomorrow, she says, catching me off guard. I've always been honest with her. I've never filled her head with fairy tales like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. Abby, the tooth fairy is make-believe. Mommies and daddies pretend to be the tooth fairy for their kids. My words bounce off her. I'd love to give you $1 for that tooth, though. That's okay. Miss Martha said when it falls out, she'll give it to the tooth fairy and I'll get $10. Martha, our elderly next-door neighbor, watches Abby every day after school until I get home from work. I'll have to talk to her tonight after I put Abby to bed. Why don't you let me hold on to it for you, for safekeeping? Abby looks up at me distrustfully, but reluctantly hands over the tooth. I knock on Martha's door at 8:45, fully aware that she might already be asleep. The door slowly swings open, though. She greets me warmly, and we chat for a minute before I get to business. Martha, I say, Abby knows the tooth fairy isn't real, so I'd appreciate if you didn't talk to her about things like that anymore. Oh honey, I think you'd better come inside. Thanks, but Abby's asleep. I really shouldn't leave her. It'll only be a minute, she says. I sigh. In the living room, she shows me a photo of her deceased husband. Frank didn't believe in the tooth fairy either. I stare at her. Who could blame him? We didn't have kids, so he was never around anyone losing their teeth. How could he know? Once his started falling out, though, I showed him. Martha, I promised your girl the tooth fairy would give her $10 for her tooth. I'm willing to offer you $100 right now if you leave it with me. I don't even have it with me, I lie, as if that's the reason why I won't sell her my daughter's tooth. Then what's that bulge in your pocket? You need help, Martha, and you're done watching Abby. I turn to leave, but she suddenly rushes at me with surprising speed. She grabs my forearms, pleading. It's not like I won't give her one back, she says and reaches into her mouth. She pulls out a tooth too easily and offers it to me. This is even one of my favorites, she says. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. I'd probably account for 1 or 2 of them if I were stupid enough to call for help. In domestic violence homicides, women are 6 times more likely to be killed when there is a gun in the house. If I could, I'd get rid of it. Someone like him shouldn't have access to a gun in the first place, but I figure that's just my bad luck. Domestic victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behavior. Ain't that the truth? You know it gets really bad when you're more scared of being alive than whatever pain death may bring. He wasn't like this at first. He was a thin-framed kind of thing. Cuter, too. I guess the increase in bulk bolstered his boldness. Youth correlates with foolishness and irrationality, I suppose, but his decisions are rather violent. Drop a dish, get punched in the face. Get home from work too late, get punched in the face. More serious infractions result in him threatening us with the gun. Unfortunately, Henry and I are pretty accustomed to this. He's a lot rougher with Henry than he is with me, like on purpose. He feels like he has to assert his dominance and affirm with Henry that he's undeniably the man of the house. I've tried to help him, of course, but usually that resulted in a black eye. I'm at a loss, and Henry's self-confidence has nosedived. Friends have advised us in the past. Intervention. Call the police. Stay with us for a bit. But they couldn't possibly understand our position. They don't realize how incredibly demonic this person is, and how determined he is to keep us firmly under his thumb. Sometimes, Henry will cry out of nowhere because of how terrified he is. I try to soothe him, remind him that men shouldn't cry, that he needs to be brave. He gets angry if he hears Henry cry. Then comes the verbal abuse, maybe a kick in the stomach or two to keep him quiet for the rest of the night. When I take Henry back to our room, I soothe him the best I can. The years of torment have pretty much broken him, though. There's only so much more he can take, and I'm reaching my limits as well, both physically and mentally. As much as we'd like to escape this hell, our options are narrow, if not non-existent. But what can we do? He's only 12, and his father and I have no idea how he got like this. July 5th, 10:23 a.m. I awake to someone shaking me. The wind blows through empty beer bottles from last night's party and the sun tries to bake me to a crisp. My arms and legs, covered in mosquito bites, itch terribly. I sit up, groaning at the pounding in my head. I thought I was done drinking to black out. Fuck. Someone shakes me again. I squint and look up at my human alarm clock. It's Mark. The realization that I don't remember him showing up last night embarrasses me. I tilt my head slightly until he blots out the sun. "Hey, buddy," he says, crouching down to my level. There's a twinkle in his eye. "I have to stop fucking blacking out," I say. He smiles. "How much do you remember?" I think there were some fireworks." He pats my leg kindly. His smile is wide. "Oh, there were indeed. I'm glad to hear that you don't remember anything else." "I don't remember anything either." He winks at me in a queer way and stands up. "Well, I'm off. I've got a lot to do today, you know." "Oh yeah?" I'm not sure what he's getting at. "My mistake. I forgot that you blacked out." His eyebrows raise up and down quickly with his last two words. He laughs and turns, walking away. My interest in his demeanor fades with his departure, and I gratefully accept the invitation to fall back asleep. July 5th, 3:31 a.m. I am beyond blasted. This 4th of July party fucking sucked. My head is spinning. Maybe I just need to lie down. July 5th, 2:45 a.m. Mark shakes my hand. "It's official then," he says. "Tomorrow it is." "Tomorrow," I echo back, and then bust up laughing. I'm so drunk, man. I'm not gonna remember shit tomorrow. I burp, surprising myself. "You really want me to do this, right?" he asks. "Oh, for sure, dude. That would make my life so much easier." I pat his arm, grateful to have a friend that I can joke around with like this to blow off steam. July 5th, 2:15 a.m. "Mark!" I yell. He's just arrived. Hopefully this means that he'll give me the time of day, unlike all the other fuckheads here. "I missed you," he tells me as he embraces me. "You too, brother, you too. I've got so much to tell you, man," I say, slurring. "I want you to kill that bitch." He looks around a moment. "Let's talk somewhere private," he says, and ushers me away from the party. July 5th, 12:25 a.m. I slam a shot, and another, and another. Rinse and repeat. July 4th, 11:40 p.m. Michelle shows up at the party with her new boyfriend, Derek, and makes out with him in front of me. I'm so heartbroken and angry that I don't notice the fireworks have begun, despite the oohs and ahs they elicit from the crowd around me. The bright blue of the room did little to improve my dour mood. It was meant to give the illusion that I was outside under a cloudless sky, but instead it only served to remind me that I was too miserable to brave the real thing. I puffed on a cigarette as I scrolled through the NSFL site, watching video after video, the urge to witness people die come from a deep, dark place somewhere inside me. I paused at one particularly gruesome recording. It was a dashcam video of a driver who tried to pass a line of cars. The footage showed the occupants of the red Mustang race out into the oncoming lane, only to lose control and their lives as they failed to avoid the approaching semi. What a fucking loser, I typed out in the discussion section below the video. That's what you get for being in such a hurry. My remark echoed, and was echoed by a number of other users, as was a variety of other apathetic comments. It was the same for the other videos too. Perhaps it was just anonymity that allowed for such callousness, or perhaps it was simply part of our nature. Either way, I felt something akin to pleasure typing out such thoughts. I clicked through some more videos. A bunch of drunken college students blowing their fingers off of fireworks, a parkour wannabe cracking his head open, a motorcyclist without a helmet crashing into and over a car. And then I saw it. A thumbnail that held a vaguely familiar figure. I clicked on the link to open the player and watched as grainy footage of a computer room filled the screen. The setting itself wasn't anything spectacular, but as I watched the curtains flutter in the sky blue painted room, I felt a chill suffuse me that had little to do with the open window just behind me. The face in view was intimately familiar to me, and I watched intently as I went to place a cigarette in the ashtray. Distracted by something on his computer, the other me didn't notice as the smoldering butt rolled from the lip of the tray and onto the floor. There it must have ignited the month's worth of dust and crumbs that caked the shag carpet, for soon a raging fire arose. Too late, the man noticed, though he still tried to suppress the flames before the smoke and heat sent him toppling to the ground. For the first time a sickness arose within me as I read the comments. He did. Natural selection in progress. What a loss. The house, I mean, not the idiot. I started to type a reply in defense of the man when I saw it. The red light next to my webcam had blinked on. The small LED mesmerized me, and distractedly, I went to place my cigarette aside. My big brother Aaron wasn't a particularly oppressive older sibling. He could actually be pretty cool at times. He taught me how to play wiffle ball, how to hide my broccoli and my potato skins. From my current perspective, he was a great big brother. The kind of older sibling I'd want for my children. That's not to say he wasn't above the typical childhood torments, most of which revolved around him making light of how fearfully your typical 5-year-old could interpret the world. Most of Aaron's admonitions about the swing set being atop quicksand or the requisite basement monster were quickly forgotten, like most of the concerns or preoccupations that kindergarten-aged children have. Maybe it was because of what happened around 5th grade that I remember his worst prank. "Keep the closets closed, little bro," he'd say with his typically manic seriousness. "Never walk by an open closet, ever, because then this happens." He'd hastily explain while gripping my arm until it turned bright white. Without him even having to say it, I could almost see what he was telling me. Decrepit-looking but shockingly fast hands shooting out from the closet's darkness to loudly clasp your arm. It was funny, but I don't even remember yelling at him to let go. Our mother must have walked in and broke us up. I honestly can't remember. That wide, punctuating stare he gave me as his fingers bore into my forearm, that I could recall as a memory all by itself. When I was about 10 years old, Aaron went missing. What frightened me the most was how nakedly fearful my parents were in front of me, how little they tried to hide everything from me. We moved soon after. Mom and Dad couldn't take living in that house anymore, despite it being built from scratch by her father after he came out of the service. I always felt like I should have told someone something. Something to my parents, the police even, my friends. But I didn't. I suppose my father knew enough. "Never go into the attic, son," he'd tell me, "no matter what you hear." So you had a nice time? Eric casually meted out to his date. I did, Marcy replied, looking back at him as earnestly as she could. She couldn't believe this was happening. She was doing that thing again with her nose, Eric thought to himself. That little wrinkle that girls did when they tried not to smile. He took it as a good sign. He really liked Marcy. She was the only girl at school who didn't act like she was afraid to be around him. Good, I'm glad. Good. Did you? Did I? What? His date giggled. Did you have a nice time? Stupid, was all he could think to himself. She probably thinks you're not listening or something. Oh yeah, definitely. The unlimited bread was... I liked it. It was good bread. I suck, Eric quietly concluded to himself. Yeah, unlimited bread. It really made the evening. Marcy facetiously agreed as she bit down on her lip. She's making fun of you. No, she's not, he told himself. She's trying to make me feel comfortable. She thinks you're an idiot. No, she doesn't. Oh, really? Take it off then. Take it. Yeah, come on, Romeo. Let's see what happens then. Eric, what's wrong? Marcy. Eric began as the most beautiful girl at Claymore High waited for his response. I just need to see something, he said, removing the duct tape from her mouth. Marcy Otrowski quickly let out a wheezing gasp as she could finally let out the sobs that had been held in back of her throat. Eric, please, she blurted out. I thought you were having a nice time, Eric quizzically inquired. Stranger than her response was that he suddenly found himself in the lumber shed. How did they get here from the garage? Eric, please. Oh, I want to go. I want to go home. Please, I want to see my mom and dad. Please, I'm not mad. I won't tell. Please. Told ya. As Marcy feebly attempted to struggle from her restraints, Eric soberly conceded defeat. Placing fresh tape on the young woman's mouth, he found them both again in his parents' garage. Eric, please, Marcy asked him as she casually fumbled with the car's cigarette lighter. Are you feeling okay? Hesitantly, and with a confusion about how he could stand on so many different places, he responded. Marcy, would you go to the dance with me on Friday? Oh, she replied, hand on her heart. I would, Eric. He smiled at her timidly, finding his own properly alongside her. With some reclarions of his own, Eric moved towards her and delicately kissed her. Dad was singing along with the radio. Even with my headphones on, I could hear his off-key voice. The radio sang. Nice. What kind of weirdo would write a song like that? Of course, I couldn't say that to him. He was in a good mood for once. The radio continued. What the hell is that even supposed to mean? I kept my head down, rereading the text from Evelyn. Her parents weren't happy about her coming out. Mine weren't thrilled, but at least they pretended to be supportive. So who's the girl you have a crush on? Like he was reading my mind. Evelyn, Dad. Like I haven't already told him like 100 times. Chloe, you know we love you no matter who you choose to love. I could hear the but coming. But, and there it was. We just think you're too young to really make this kind of decision. Dad, I'm 13. Most of my friends are already dating. Maybe that came out a little harsher than I intended. But damn it, it was true. Raise your fucking voice to me again and you won't make it to 14, you little shit. 0 to 60. What a surprise. I looked down at my phone again. And this, he reached across the front seat trying to grab my phone. Always burying your face in that goddamn phone. The car swerved as I pulled my hand with the phone in it away. Get off. The look on his face. It was like all the anger he was holding back was focused on my phone. Give me that fucking... He didn't get to finish the sentence, because just then something hit the car with a dull and loud thump. Blood splashed up on the windshield. It was like the air in the car had stopped moving. The radio sang, unfazed by the situation. Dad pulled over. Neither of us said anything for a minute. Although it wasn't really late, it was dark enough we couldn't see anything on the road. The only car on the road was ours for the time being. Probably a deer, Dad said, his hand shaking slightly on the wheel. He opened his door. I went to open mine. No, I don't want you to see it if it's badly hurt. He got out and went around the front of the car. As he came around the passenger side, he stopped, his eyes wide. I started to roll down my window. He put his hand up in a halting motion. He looked a little pale, which looked odd for a Puerto Rican man. He crouched by the wheel well and tugged on something. Oh my God, that poor deer, I thought. He tugged again and grunted as it came loose. I only saw it for a second, but it didn't look right. Not for a deer's leg or hoof or whatever. Dad? I called. He tossed it onto the side of the road, again with the halting hand. He quickly got back into the car and we drove away. I was afraid to say anything. His face was blank. He kept licking his lips and looking in the rearview mirror. There was still no one on the road, but we were coming up on the main road. I didn't even see that deer. Came out of nowhere, he said with a nervous chuckle. We pulled into a do-it-yourself car wash. 5 of the 6 bays were empty. We pulled into the one furthest from the other car. Can't drive around with deer guts all over the car, he said as he got out. You wait here while I get change. As he walked over to the change machine, I had to see the damage. Our car was already banged up. No one would notice a bigger dent here or there, but I still had to see. I opened my door and stood with one foot on the ground and peered over the car door. Blood covered the front bumper and sprayed down the side of the car. I leaned out and looked at the wheel well. Turned out I was right about that hoof not looking right. The way he pulled it out, it must have been wedged in there pretty good. I slowly sat back down and closed my door. Dad came back and started power washing the blood off the car. He scrubbed all the blood off in record time. I've never seen him work so fast. His face was twisted with the exertion he put into it. That's what I keep telling myself. He wasn't crying. Not my dad. Must have got some soap in his eyes. He kept rubbing them while he sprayed the car down. He finished and got back in the car. His shirt and pants were wet from the mist of the sprayer. Good as new, he half smiled, eyes still tearing from the soap. But as we pulled away, I had to look. Not that I didn't see it when I looked the first time, but to confirm what I knew to be the truth of the situation. On the floor of the passenger's side lay a shred of denim, a bloody shred torn from the arm my dad pulled from the wheel well. This next story is true, and the creator would like to remain anonymous. This is my experience with the demonic. Not a word of what is written is a lie or embellished in any way. I haven't experienced any of this in the past 2 years, thank fuck. This shook me up real bad. In 2014, I began going to church again. In a church meeting, I met a lovely girl who I fell in love with instantly, and we started dating fairly soon after. She had recently adopted a young boy who is now my adopted son. This girl and I are now married, but sadly separated. In the summer of 2014, my wife moved into a place just outside the city. She lived there with my adopted son, and it was a lovely place. Small enough to be cozy, but big enough for her and the kid to have birthdays and Christmas. We didn't live together at this point due to our religious beliefs. It all began when this girl and I began sharing a bed. That seemed to kick whatever this thing was off a real treat. One night, my wife and I were intimate with each other, and from out of nowhere something dropped a large unseen object on the floor, making a loud bang. We were both terrified. On another occasion, we were both sat in bed, and something threw a heavy pair of my wife's stilettos hard at the front door. We were both heavily shaken by this. Little did we know things were only just getting started. Things followed a pattern in the next few weeks. My wife is one of those people whose head will hit the pillow and she'll be asleep. I, on the other hand, take much longer to get off to sleep. Late one night, following a church prayer group, my wife began to snore. I immediately heard footsteps on the stairs. Hard, purposeful footsteps followed by a shuffling noise, much like whatever it was dragging something behind it as it walked up the stairs. I was terrified, woke my wife, and both of us couldn't get back to sleep. I will never forget the sound of those footsteps. The thought still terrifies me to this day. Things reached a peak for me one particular night. This is genuinely the most terrifying thing that has happened to me in my life. In the middle of the night, I woke up half awake, half asleep type thing. Those who have experienced similar will know what I mean. When I woke, the footsteps were back, but this time at the top of the stairs. Then I saw it. He, or whatever it was monstrous. About 7 foot tall, dressed head to toe in black and gray, large boots on his feet. On his head he had a bag, which seemed to be made out of a thread-like material, with black cuts made for eyes. He paused for a moment, watching me, then gave me a creepy wave and made to go into my adopted son's room. I yelled out, paralyzed in fear. My wife shook me and I woke, shaken to my core. The footsteps continued until my wife and I stopped sharing a bed. Our assumption at the time was that it was demonic because we were sharing a bed while us not married. I have since lost my faith, so I'm not sure exactly what that monstrous thing was. It is, however, evidence for me that there is something more than what we see around us. Evidence of the other side, perhaps. Whenever I remember my wife's old house, it makes me feel uneasy. The house had a really creepy feeling to it, like we were sharing it with another entity. The irony is that when we did get married and lived briefly together, the haunting stopped. No footsteps, no devilish tall guy. All of it was over.